Good evening again. It is Stephanie Rule. We have had a long week, and it is time for the nightcap. Day 96 of the Trump administration. And if you are keeping score at home, it is getting hard to keep track. This week, the president threatened to fire the Federal Reserve chair. Then he had no intention of doing so. He said the Chinese president had called him and negotiations on tariffs are underway. But Chinese officials say they are not in any talks with the U.S. Donald Trump is single-handedly sending markets up, sending them down, and sending them back up again. The markets don't like it. Investors don't like it. Businesses don't like it. But I have a sinking feeling he likes it. What he does not like is his approval rating, which has been falling steadily. So let's get into it. We have a great nightcap crew here with me in D.C. Dave Weigel is here, political reporter for Semaphore. Veteran Washington correspondent John Harwood. He's a distinguished fellow at Duke University and columnist for Zeteo Substack. And Jason Johnson, a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, and lucky us, an MSNBC political contributor. Gentlemen, we are approaching the culmination, the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. You are not allowed to describe it in one word as chaotic. But how would you sum up this period of time?
Well, I wouldn't have said chaotic because
really?
I think the story of this 100 days has been a sort of bizarro FDR situation where instead of Congress doing bold, persistent experimentation in league with the president, Congress, Republicans in Congress, to be specific, handed their power over to the president and have let him run on everything. And you've seen the story of the Republican Party in this period has been them waiting to see what Trump does and then endorsing it, and which changes the way things are covered. We cover conflict. We cover, if in the first term, if Bob Corker said something, we covered it. And he had resistance. I think the story has been all his experimentation being approved by one of our political parties with no real resistance. You've been talking about the effects of this. The party has signed on for stuff that has not worked in a lot of cases. So, but that transformation of the entire party endorsing this imperial presidency, that's what's been every week shaping the changes to the country, I think.
I think it's closing on a very strong down note for Donald Trump.
Like a wah-wah.
Very decidedly. And it may mark a momentum shift that is going to continue. You know, he started with shock and awe. He was doing, as David said, a million things. Congress was stepping back. And now we see the markets have turned down. People can, which gives a measurable thing that people can look at. Everyone knows that it's Donald Trump himself who is doing this. It's not conditions in the economy because he was handed a good economy. And I think the fact that he's done that and been forced to back off, and people have seen that, raises doubt about whether he knows what he's doing on a whole range of other fronts. And he doesn't. The Doge thing has not been successful. They have not found waste and fraud. They have found programs that Elon Musk and Donald Trump don't like. The deportation regime has gotten increasingly secret police-like in terms of grabbing people without proof that they've done anything especially wrong. Other than,
and even their numbers aren't what they wanted them to be.
The numbers aren't what they wanted to be, and they're not getting dangerous criminals out, which is why they're having to make claims about people who don't have criminal records or people who write an op-ed at the college newspaper that they don't like. So I think, and the Ukraine war has not been solved, as he said it would.
Israel as well.
Israel as well. So I think people can see that this is a guy who is flailing, and you see that in the numbers. You know, he was at or near 50 when he started. He's around low 40s now, maybe 40 in one of the polls. I think Reuters had him at 37 yesterday. So, you know, I think he's been badly weakened politically. He's got a Pentagon in total disarray and a defense secretary who's clearly in over his head. I think this is a difficult moment for Trump and a time that people have begun, Democrats and outside institutions, Harvard leading the way, have begun to stand up and push back, and they've done it pretty effectively.
I want to get your first 100 days, but before, I want you to think about this, Jason, and I want to sort of mentally push back on John's idea because we're all kind of sitting here nodding our heads. But if the majority of Americans actually said, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, we would see more Republicans other than just Don Bacon pushing back, right? They've got midterms not that far away, and it goes back to your original point. Republicans are basically acquiescing. We're watching bad decisions. chaotic decision or things not work out, and they're saying, thank you, sir, we'll have another. So do we really think there's going to be a momentum shift? Because if there was, they'd be worried about their own hinds.
No, because there's a lot of people who like this stuff. There's a lot of people who like this stuff. And here's the thing. Here's my first 100 years. We tried to tell you. Right? Whether it's Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris, people told the American public, this is what he's going to do. It was in Project 2025. This was not crazy TikTok conspiracy theory. They said they were going to dismantle the administrative state, and that's what they're doing. Now, all the heck and nonsense that you have with Doge, all the things that you have going on with immigration, these were all things that he said. The issue that I see is not with the Republicans, because I don't think they've been a functional party ever since Donald Trump walked down the elevator, right? I don't think they've operated as anything other than a rubber stamp. What's been concerning to me is the lack of plan by Democrats over and over again in the face of something that they knew was coming 8 months ago. We are now almost 100 days into this, and they still don't have a counter message. The bravest thing they did was Cory Booker standing for 25 hours, which was simple and realistic because regular people could understand it.
Yes, but it didn't offer anything else. And one of the reasons Donald Trump's base gives him space is because they, like a lot of people, say, the country's not working for me. Right. And they're giving him time because they're saying his plan might not work, but at least there's a plan. And Cory Booker did stand up, but they've yet to say, well, here's what we're going to offer.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing, because it was at least understandable. I don't care who you are. Most people would understand. I wouldn't stand in line for 25 hours to get a Star Wars movie, right? Like, people understood. It was like, okay, this is.
I definitely wouldn't do that.
Even I wouldn't, right? And I'm into that stuff. But the Democrats as a whole, they don't have a message. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't have a message. Chuck Schumer doesn't have a message. I expected this from the Republican Party. I knew this is the kind of stuff they were going to do. What I'm shocked by is that the only people who seem to be talking are Bernie and AOC running around the country. And trust me, I went to their rally in Los Angeles. They're still making the same mistakes they always did, which is a crowd in downtown Los Angeles that still doesn't look any more diverse than downtown Wisconsin. That's the issue. So the first 100 days, Democrats still failing, Republicans doing what I expect.
Okay, but then I'm the naive turkey, because I will say Donald Trump has been talking about tariffs for 40 years. He loves them. He wants to implement them. But I, like many other people, didn't actually think he was going to do it. If he had just taken Joe Biden's economy, did the tax cuts, deregulated so businesses would basically be able to do whatever they wanted, he would be smooth sailing, because he could even take Joe Biden's economy and oversell it, which is what he does. And he could roll down to Mar-a-Lago, flog his meme coin, dance with True Social, and play golf every weekend. So for a lot of people, me included, I'm embarrassed to say, I'm surprised he went with the tariff war first.
Well, I'm surprised. It's much more on every front than I expected. I knew it was going to be bad. It's much worse. But I think, you know, if he was a run-of-the-mill con man who had
I thought he was saying if he was a run-of-the-mill politician. If he was a run-of-the-mill con man, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry.
If he was a run-of-the-mill con man, he would recognize at what point he could make the con work by taking the Biden economy and calling it his own, which it isn't. But there's something wrong with him. He is, I don't know what you call it, malignant narcissist, sociopath. You know, people apply different names to what Donald Trump, what his mental condition is, but he can't do that. He can't constrain himself in that way, and he doesn't have people around him who are inclined to constrain him or able to constrain him. He had some of that in the first term. That helped him. But he doesn't have it now, and he's not controlling himself.
This is exactly what I heard from a very big investor today who voted for Donald Trump, who said one of the main issues is he really, truly has made loyalty to him his #1 priority. And again, we shouldn't be surprised. Howard Lutnick said it when they were during the transition. And unlike the first term where you had a Gary Cohn or a Jared Kushner or a Steve Mnuchin, there's no one to push back on him. And Wall Street doesn't like it, but Trump loves it. So for Wall Street or for the business community, they're in the, you know, if you choose clowns, you get a circus. The issue is the outsiders don't like it, but Trump is going, I'm down with Pete Hegseth. Every day he's just telling me how great I am and how good my hair looks.
Or with immigration, because you were talking about if he just kept Biden's economy in place. He wasn't going to keep Biden's deportation system in place, but what did he add to it? The deportations that they have added on top of this, or taking visas away from college students, the Garcia mess in El Salvador. This is something I'd add Chris Van Hollen to the list of Democrats who've done something in the last week. That's the one surprise the last 100 days is that Democrats really were on their back foot about immigration, did not know how to talk about it, were terrified that it was Trump's secret sauce and they're going to lose and everything. And he has been so hubristic, listening to Stephen Miller to speak of there were people who have an open door with him, that you've started to see a backlash on his best issue, which wouldn't have been there if they were just deporting. Here's a high-profile criminal. Look at this terrible story of somebody who committed a crime. Look at this drunk driver. Look at this accused murder. They're not doing that. They're going further with a vision of just shrinking the foreign non-citizen population of the country, and they've done it in a way that has allowed Democrats to come back. A week ago, even if you asked Democrats of El Salvador, they were much more divided.
They arrested a judge today who sent a defendant out a door that was in a non-public area, and they went in and arrested the judge. I think that's something that's probably satisfying to Trump, satisfying to Tom Homan. I would be very surprised if that goes over well in the current environment.
Okay, this is why this is super interesting to me, because a week ago, when we got started with the Maryland man in the prison in El Salvador, suddenly all these Wall Street guys were talking about the story to me, and I'm like, what do they care? None of these people are immigration activists. Right. But what they truly care about is the rule of law, because nobody wants to invest money and do business in a place that's being run mobster style. It's why nobody does business in Russia. And so suddenly this issue, even if Trump just rolled up super tough on the border, which Joe Biden didn't, that would have been a win for him.
Arbitrary expansions of power don't make people comfortable, right? If I don't know what you're going to do week in and week out, I'm not happy with it. Even people who are hostile and don't like people who are undocumented, you don't like brown people, whatever, you don't like folks getting yanked off the street. You don't like folks being
by
told,
people with masks on and no uniforms.
And I can tell you this because this is where it gets into the lower level, right? The TikTok world, the world of young people and under 30 who don't watch any of this and don't pay attention, you know what they're saying about immigration? They're seeing farmers say, I don't have workers here anymore. They're seeing college kids saying, oh my gosh, my roommate is afraid to write an op-ed, blah, blah, blah. They're picking this up as this is not getting rid of criminals. This is getting rid of my friends. This is getting rid of my neighbors. My pastor is talking about this.
And we're seeing it in Trump's poll numbers with young men who he crushed it with.
Exactly. When Joe Rogan is saying, hey, that's a bad idea.
Right.
Okay. Right. And I always say this, let's not be crazy. He didn't lose Joe Rogan. Rogan is still going to vote for him. But when people start criticizing the president, him and the guys who run Barstool Sports, he's lost those people because even they think this is crazy. At some point, you're going to see a baseball player get snatched off the field in the middle of a game. And then a lot of the people are going to say, oh, my gosh, this is a problem.
Yeah.
I want to share, I spoke to David Rubenstein, who's chairman of Carlyle today, and I want to share something he said about the tariff war because I think it's super interesting. Watch this.
It's hard to beat up on the president of the biggest country in the world with the second biggest economy in the world and who's going to be president for a long time after President Trump is president. And so I don't think you can intimidate Xi Jinping in a way that, I think, some people might have thought.
And here's the thing. He went on to say, listen, if you're a New York real estate developer and you want to stiff a subcontractor in Queens, you can do that. If Trump wants to beat up a bunch of little countries around the world, that'll work. Maybe he can get some tiny wins, and he's going to find his somewhat graceful exit from this trade war. But he has launched a full-scale trade war with China. Xi Jinping, who is absolutely comfortable, his country is comfortable suffering. He will never allow himself to be humiliated, and he doesn't need to get reelected. So there isn't a graceful off-ramp with China, and that's the whole ballgame here.
No, there isn't. You've even heard talk of returning to stuff that sounds a lot like what Barack Obama was trying to negotiate at the end of his presidency.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Trans-Pacific Partnership that Trump couldn't wait to rip.
How do we isolate China? And when you hear that discussion, it makes you think, was there not really a plan for the most obvious outcome of a trade war, of starting this with China? I think Rubenstein explained it pretty well. There are just a lot of people, and I'm not a financial reporter like you, but I hear it from people who thought about sending a kid here, thought about investing here, thought about opening a branch of something here, and are worried. That wasn't happening the first term. There were moves against China, agriculture moves against China, but there wasn't that. There wasn't the fear of some European company starting up here. And you first on the first 30 days or so, announcements of investments by Apple, things of that nature. You haven't seen that in the last 30 days. That there's the drumbeat of new manufacturing starts we saw at the end of the Biden administration, which Biden couldn't really get people to pay attention to. That slowed down, and we're talking about it now. We saw this even with COVID. It takes weeks and months for people to see the impact of these trade decisions, it's much more, I'm using the word chaotic, it's much more chaotic than the first term. And when they explain what they're doing, you realize they just didn't see the most obvious outcome of a risk.
I think there's also a personal dimension to this, which is that
there always is.
Donald Trump gets off on displays of dominance over other people, trying to be an all-powerful,
But
strong
you've got to
man.
know who you can bully.
Right. I think that comes from a very deep insecurity within him. He knows that Vladimir Putin is tougher and stronger than he is. He knows that Xi Jinping is tougher and stronger than he is. So I think inherently he's predisposed, even when he tries to look like he's controlling the situation, to back down. That's why he's saying, well, we're talking to China, and China says, no, we're not talking to you. That's a losing hand ultimately for Trump.
Here's the thing: when you're dealing with foreign leaders who know better, right? You always look foolish. And Trump, whenever we saw this back the first term when he was talking to Pena in Mexico, where he was like, "Yeah, you know, we're building the wall." It's very much I broke up with her. No, he didn't. No, I broke up with him. I can show you the text messages. That's what he sounds like whenever he has these conversations. But I'm looking at this also globally. Look at what's happening in Australia right now. Look what's happening in Canada. He is empowering center-left parties because parties that were, you know, in a sort of Biden Democratic way, that were on the downturn, that people are unhappy with them, now they're the ones standing up to Trump. So he's actually making his enemies stronger and alienating the people who used to support him at the same time. It's insane.
He's also doing himself no favors on the lying front, right? He wants to say that the media is out to get him, that they're constantly pointing the finger at him. But we now have, in the last few weeks, a White House. Trump says one thing, Bessent says another, the press secretary something else. Just even in the last 2 days, we're talking to China, and China, we haven't spoken at all. That's not the media going after the president. That is the media doing our basic job of fact-checking, and he's handing it to us on a silver platter.
He is, and at the same time...
Even Fox News is calling him out.
Yeah, and you notice that even if they don't call him out, you'll notice less defense, let's say, of in the Hegseth story. You notice fewer Republicans, less coverage on Fox, which employed him until a couple months ago, defending him. There's not a denunciation of something or a call, except for the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which Trump has a vendetta against and Vance has even more vendetta against. Apart from that, they don't...
Because they tell the truth every day?
But they don't... They're the globalists. They're the bad Murdoch. And he's called this out specifically, I think Trump has recently. Yes, they take pleasure in not listening to them, and they have a more pliant media literally in the room, in the White House, in the Oval Office, asking friendly questions. And friendly questions don't test anything. The rejection of the criticism and the acceptance of friendly questions, you saw this with... when he was asked about the Garcia situation, people were just kind of repeating talking points from the president of El Salvador. They are having an amen choir tell them everything is going well when it isn't. And I think that's another factor. It was not that intense the first term. It wasn't fun to go through the scouring they got from the media, but they did react much more quickly, and they did have people more honestly telling them that they need to correct course. They don't have that anymore.
And I think the lies have become less effective over time. People can see that he's flailing on trade. He acts like he's art of the deal, master negotiator. No, he's just reacting.
Nobody's even saying art of the deal anymore, right? A week and when this thing first started, there's Bill Ackman, art of the deal. I haven't heard any serious person mention that book in the last 7 days.
Well, are you counting any serious people in the Trump administration? Because those are separate categories. But, you know, people can see what he's doing there. On Pete Hegseth.
We're going to talk about Pete Hegseth right after the break. Let's take a quick commercial. Nobody is going anywhere.